This is the iPhone 16e, Apple's latest entry-level iPhone. It offers a more affordable price point by cutting back on some of the features found in higher-end models, but what exactly do you give up, and is there a better option for your money? For the past week, I've been digging into the 16e, using it as my main device to try and answer those questions, and I think I've got a pretty good idea of what you can expect to get from it, what it excels at, and where it falls short. Let's get into it. Hey everyone, Kyle Erickson here. It's been quite a while since Apple released a new budget-friendly phone. Previous to the iPhone 16e, it was 3 years ago with the third generation iPhone SE, so we were definitely due for a refresh. But the 16e is quite a departure from the SE lineup in a bunch of areas, and the easiest to notice is the design. Apple has done away with the old iPhone 7 style housing with the home button in favor of a more modern look with Face ID and a notched display, where you either have black or white color options to choose from. I chose to go with white on this particular model, and the first thing that I noticed is the finish is flatter and has less of a shimmer than the rest of the 16 series, although it is very well built with an aluminum body and glass front and back panels. This is only 167 grams, which makes it the lightest full-sized iPhone with Face ID since the iPhone 12, which generally makes it a little more pleasant to hold and use over the other current models, although the corners are sharper than the iPhone 15 and 16. It actually reminds me quite a bit of the iPhone 14 in that regard. Apple has also given you the action button on the 16e, but not included the new camera control, and you obviously only have one single rear camera lens, and a front display with no dynamic island. That is a 6.1-inch XDR OLED panel with a max brightness of 800 nits or 1200 nits in HDR, which again matches the iPhone 14 but falls short of the 15 and 16, but placed side by side, for the most part looks very similar. You'll likely only notice a difference in brightness with HDR content, but it looks great for watching media, editing photos, and similar tasks. And as far as color and contrast goes with general usage, you're getting a really predictable image that doesn't stray from what you'd expect buying an iPhone. It also shouldn't come as a surprise that the 16e display is only 60 Hz, given that the model up from this doesn't go past that, but something minor to note is that it does not carry the latest version of ceramic shield protection on the glass like the rest of the 16 series, but is the previous iteration of it. I've honestly never really had much of an issue with durability on either generation of ceramic shield, but the biggest difference between this screen and any other iPhone from the last couple of years is the notch is coming back on the 16e, which took a day or two to get used to. It wasn't until I switched to this phone that I realized how often that I use the dynamic island on my 16 Pro. For me, a lot of that is for pausing media or seeing live feedback from my apps, and not having that has been a bit of an adjustment. It's not a huge deal by any means. You can still swipe down to perform similar actions, and live activities will still show on the lock screen, but it is one instance where the regular iPhone 15 does feel a bit better, and there is a pretty good case as to why you might want to still choose the 15 over the 16e. The iPhone 16e comes in at $599 USD or $899 Canadian, where the iPhone 15 is $100 more in both currencies. And there are a bunch of features that you get with the 15 that aren't in the 16e, and on the flip side, very few features that you don't get with the iPhone 15 over the 16e outside of Apple Intelligence. Apple Intelligence is still in its infancy, and in terms of the things that you would actually notice on the 16e that would be absent without Apple AI would be summarized notifications, the new Mail app, ChatGPT integrated with Siri, and maybe things like Genmoji to a lesser extent. You can also use visual intelligence via the action button if you want on the 16e, but the more advanced features that will actually make an impact in your usage, like better Siri functionality, could still be years away, so I really wouldn't expect a whole lot on that front for a while. The curious thing to me is, even with all that Apple Intelligence stuff, when it comes to the cameras, or camera I should say, given that this only has the single rear lens, I find some of the software choices a bit disappointing. While editing a photo, you'll still get Apple's cleanup feature that is exclusive to the A18 chip that's in here, but Apple has actually stripped out some of the functionality in the camera apps where it just doesn't really seem like it makes much sense. Within the camera app itself, I no longer have the auto portrait features that I get in the iPhone 15 or 16, where in the regular photo mode, those models auto detect people or pets, or I can click on the screen to initiate depth control on objects, but it does recognize those things in the photo info. It just seems like you'd actively have to choose to remove that, which seems odd, especially given that you're marketing this as an intelligent product, and there is a working portrait mode with depth control. You'll also notice that you don't have access to the next-gen photographic styles like you do within the iPhone 16 or 16 Pro, which I suppose that you could justify given that there's no camera control button, but it would still be nice if those were included in the UI rather than just the standard styles that you can set up in the camera settings. That being said, the actual photos coming off that single rear lens on the iPhone 16e do look very good. That camera is a 48 megapixel sensor with an f1.6 aperture, and it does have a smaller sensor than the iPhone 15 or 16, but by and large, the photos versus those other main lenses don't look much different at all. They've got the same great color and dynamic range. At times, you'll see the shadows boosted up a little that sometimes maybe won't look as natural as you'd expect, but you can still make adjustments to your image in the Photos app afterwards, and the nice thing is, because this is a 48 megapixel sensor, you will get that 2x optical zoom option, so it's almost like having two lenses. Now, because this does not have an ultra-wide lens, you won't have access to macro photos like you do on the iPhone 16, and things are similar on the video side of things as well, where on one hand, you get the new audio mix features for optimizing your audio, but on the other, there are no cinematic or action modes on the 16e, and the stabilization isn't quite as good either. Every model of the iPhone since the iPhone 13 has had sensor shift stabilization, and the 16e only has optical stabilization. So on occasion, you might notice slightly more stutter, but I would say for most people, it's probably still fine. The 16e still produces 4K resolution with Dolby Vision HDR up to 60 frames per second, which is great and delivers high quality video for an entry-level phone. I just think that it's unfortunate that you have things like Dolby Vision, but not some of these other features, because it's not like they're new or that the chipset can't handle it. The A18 chip in the 16e is the same one that's in the iPhone 16, where there is a slight difference with it having one less GPU core. That's reflected in benchmarks, where the CPU scores are about the same as the regular iPhone 16, and GPU scores are around 14% lower, but doing anything performance related feels largely the same. This does well with gaming, where anything from the Apple Arcade or more demanding titles play completely fine. The phone does stay very cool. It might actually run the coolest out of any phone since I started testing for heat, and does seem to disperse heat quite well, so no issues there at all, and any other tasks like photo editing and just generally using the phone have been solid, which is to be expected, given the A18 never had any trouble previously. The only thing that I thought might be a little bit different with this phone was with the wireless signal, as this does have the brand new Apple C1 modem that replaced the Qualcomm ones Apple has been using for over a decade, so this is a pretty big deal, but for the most part, I've not been able to tell much difference at all in that sense, where any other iPhones that I've tested have similar speeds and signal strengths. Similarly with wireless connections, you do only get Wi-Fi 6 on here, where other 16 series phones have Wi-Fi 7, but that works great with good overall speeds, and I've had no drops or issues with Bluetooth that remains at version 5.3, and this really doesn't feel a whole lot different with wireless connectivity in any sense. The one other area where the C1 modem is supposed to factor in is with battery, where it's supposed to be much more efficient. And in my opinion, the battery life is probably the best part about this phone. Apple advertises that you can get up to 26 hours of video playback on the 16E compared to 22 on the 16 and 27 on the 16 Pro, but I gotta say, this definitely feels like it lasts a lot longer than my 16 Pro. In everyday real-world use, which for me is a combination of using social apps, watching media, reading news, and listening to Spotify for around 5 to 6 hours of screen on time, I end my day usually with 40 to 50% battery life left, and I can get almost another full day out of it, which is by far the best battery life that I've experienced on an iPhone in recent memory that isn't a Pro Max or a Plus, and the only real downside is when it comes to charging. Wired charging is completely fine, where this still charges via USB-C at 20 watts, and you can get a 50% charge in around a half hour, but there is no MagSafe on here, and it will only charge wirelessly at 7.5 watts, where literally every other iPhone outside of the SE since the iPhone 12 has had MagSafe, and charged at a minimum of 15 watts, which I do think is disappointing. Now, you can kind of mimic MagSafe with a case like this Spigen Neo One that I've got here, which I honestly love. Spigen didn't sponsor this or anything, I just really like these Neo One cases, but I've always forgotten to order them when new phones come out, and they sell out really fast, but
not today, Satan.
Anyway, I'll pop some links for this particular case in the description below for all the different iPhone versions if you're interested, but outside of that, there's a few other curious inclusions and exclusions, like, for example, this does not have a wideband chip, which for me is a pretty big deal. That means that precision finding for AirPods or AirTags doesn't work, and I misplace my stuff a lot. Last week, my wallet fell into a box with a bunch of paint supplies, and if I didn't have precision finding, I'd probably still be looking for it if this was my only phone, but it does still have satellite messaging, so I guess the moral of the story is, don't ever lose anything if you get the 16E, but if you get lost in the middle of nowhere, you'll be fine. In all seriousness, this is kind of a confusing product. Don't get me wrong, it's a great little phone and it's got a lot going for it. The build quality is outstanding and I love how minimal it is. The camera takes decent photos and the battery life and performance are second to none, but there are some strange omissions and things that seem like they may have been intentionally left out in the software to make this less of a phone. I think it might be more attractive if it was maybe $100 or $200 cheaper, but for $100 more, you can get the iPhone 15, which adds back an extra camera lens with functionality like cinematic and action modes, better stabilization and auto portraits. You get MagSafe, the dynamic island, and the screen is a touch brighter, but it doesn't have Apple Intelligence, which I would say, at least to this point, is far less impactful than all these other things. I know for me personally, I'm in Canada, and after taxes, the 16E cost me over $1,000, which I really wouldn't consider budget-friendly or entry-level at all. And if I'm spending that much, it just makes a lot more sense to go with a regular iPhone 16. If you're looking for something cheaper than the 16 and you're not into the 15, there are quite a few inexpensive Android devices that are really solid, and if you want Apple Intelligence, some people are recommending buying a 15 Pro used or refurbished for around the same price as the 16E. The only thing that I would caution people on with that is refurb devices that aren't sold by Apple can be risky. I don't know that I would ever go that route, but if you do, you'll want to make sure that wherever you're getting it from has solid reviews, and you don't want to end up getting a phone with terrible battery health or something where you're going to have problems with it and throw it out in 6 months. That being said, I'm sure there is a place for the iPhone 16e for certain people. I could see a lot of people that just want the cheapest new iPhone picking this up, but I just think at this price point makes things a bit more confusing for everyone, where it probably would have been more beneficial to have a device that's maybe a bit less expensive that's less powerful. In fact, I think it probably would have made sense to even wait a year for Apple Intelligence to mature a bit, and then you'd have the A18 chip available at a discount, and you might be able to position yourself a little bit better price-wise, but what do I know? I'm just some dork on the internet. I want to know what everyone else thinks and what your guys' thoughts are on this, because I'm sure there are lots of opinions. So please drop a comment down below and let me know, but that's all I have for you today. I hope you found this video useful or enjoyable. If you did, feel free to hit that like button. If you'd like to see more tech-related content or help me design a budget-friendly phone that contains no cameras, a 3-inch screen, and its only available app is not Hotdog, please subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next upload.